In his recent blog post titled Make Desertion Fast, Professor of Economics Bryan Caplan takes a deeper dive into Ukraine's offer to Russian soldiers who desert their post. Amnesty plus 5 million rubles. That's about 48,000 American dollars, which is probably several years' pay for a young Russian worker.
Caplan says that on the surface this might sound like a sweet deal, but on reflection it's anything but. Here to tell us more is Professor of Economics at George Mason University, Bryan Caplan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Right, and so this Ukrainian offer includes jail time. Do we know how much jail time?
I talked to a native Russian speaker who said that original statement by the Ukrainian government was mistranslated. So you are supposed to actually get amnesty. Oh. The real problem is that who knows whether the Ukrainian government will actually pay you given the situation. And also, if you can't get out of Ukraine and Russia, who knows what's going to become of you.
So you've come up with a superior plan. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have envisioned?
Right. Well, the most important part is that you don't get amnesty in Ukraine, you get amnesty in the EU. Right. So obviously, if you're a Russian soldier and you desert in Ukraine, even if Ukraine wins, you could easily get captured by Russians and wind up before a firing squad. You don't want that. It's just not much of an offer. Like, I'm going to go and spend my $48,000 in the middle of a war zone, assuming I don't get captured. Much better deal if you can go to the EU where you can spend your money in peace.
But you also could never go back home.
Right? That's correct, although a number of Russians would be very happy to never be able to go home as long as they could have citizenship in the EU is, I think, quite high. It is much higher income in the EU, obviously a much safer environment. So, yeah, again, of course, this doesn't mean that every single Russian soldier is going to take it. Really, the goal is to just start flipping some people and hope to start a stampede. That's really what you're going for, is if you can go and get the first 1,000 guys to go, then the next 1,000 guys are going to say, wait a second, that sounds like a pretty good deal. And if you can get a whole lot going, then most of the risk goes away because they're spending more time watching whether you're leaving than actually even hunting people down.
And I think you suggested, or maybe I'm mind reading this, but I think you suggested that what if, the first number of however many troops it is, the payment they get is higher in order to induce the early start, and then you start lowering it based on, so then you do create some kind of, ideally you create some of flood, so people want to desert at the higher rate than the lower rate.
Yeah, exactly. When a few people are leaving, they can easily watch every single person. But if it's a lot of people leaving, it really does turn into chaos. And who watches the watchers? Yeah, so there is a standard tactic in finance of the two-tier tender offer where when you want to get people to sell, you say the first people sell get a really sweet deal. And if you wait too long, then you don't get that deal. I'd say something very similar would be a great idea to try here. Not saying it's going to work for sure, but compared to the costs of what people are spending, as I was showing, like the actual cost of just bribing Russians to desert turns out to be modest compared to what we're already doing.
And also seems like they should offer more then in that case, right? Yeah. If you can buy anything, everything and everyone seems to be up for sale to a degree. So it's like just throw more money at them and put down the weapons.
Yeah, if you like €1 million for the first 10,000 to go to desert, and just think about the propaganda opportunity too. There's this bunch of guys saying, of course, the first ones who show up better have no families back in Russia because there could be retaliation. But
right, yeah, right.
You don't need to. You're not going to put 10,000 people on TV anyway. You're going to find the most charismatic guys with nothing to lose who really want to go and say what they think, and they're waving their fat stacks around. Seems like a pretty great piece of media, whatever else.
But also, they wouldn't necessarily know, back behind Russian lines, whether the person was killed or missing or deserted if they just slip off. And I'd add to your idea, pay them for whatever jeeps, tanks, or planes
that they bring with them.
They bring along with them.
In fact, they really do that.
We've talked a bunch.
So there is a famous case of a MiG pilot who deserted to the U.S. back in the 80s. There's a whole book about him, actually. The plane is the one where it's really easy to desert, although they're also going to know who you are, I think. The other stuff, driving a tank all the way through hundreds of miles of Ukraine in order to hand it over to the EU, that sounds pretty fanciful. If you just look at where the troops are, they're too far. But for a person on foot or like a Jeep, it's doable.
Yeah. We've talked a bunch on the show about Robert Smalls, the Confederate era enslaved guy who stole the USS Planter, or the CSS Planter, and turned it into the USS Planter, turned it over to Union troops. But your idea also raises interesting questions about immigration, and we had a heated conversation about immigration yesterday. And from the perspective of some more kind of nativist elements in our politics, they might say, well, we don't want all these Russians flooding into our economy. We're going to have all these freeloaders. How are we going to support them? When in reality, they're going to be supporting you. These are 18 to 22-year-old, obviously, physically healthy people who have 40 or 50 years of economic productivity ahead of them that they're going to then be pouring into the EU economy. What's your response to people who say, well, we don't need more migration into the EU?
I mean, in the maximal scenario where you get every single Russian desert, which, that's crazy. But even in that scenario, it's 200,000 guys. It's like nothing. So it's really pretty odd to be getting paranoid about something like that. Really the more important issue is it's during war that you realize how valuable human beings are. The reason why Ukraine has a lot to fear is that the Russians outnumber them 3-1 in terms of population. There's this line from Game of Thrones, excuse me, I don't know a lot about war, but isn't the side with more people usually the one that wins? And that's how it works. Right. And what is immigration about? It's about going and moving population, the people that are going to be causing problems for you, and putting them onto your side of the ledger. It's very smart.
I don't know how much you know about this, but in the history of warfare, is it common to attempt, the tactic you're describing, to pay people to induce them to desert? Obviously, there's, bribes paid to stop, Genghis Khan's army from attacking your village, or the kind of tribute scenario, but actually just trying to induce the enemy army to desert, not through fear or terrorism, but take this pile of money. I'm sure that's been done to varying degrees, but maybe it's not so much in modern warfare, I guess, that we've heard about it.
Right. I can't think of any really good examples. There is something very different about this situation than most ones in history, which is that there is a side with a very good reputation. No one is worried that if you get into the EU, they're going to go and shoot you or something like that. If EU promises to give you money, they're going to give you the money. So it's, it might not be the gold standard of reliability. It's at least the silver standard of reliability. During most wars, you were thinking, gee, if I desert, the other side will probably just kill me anyway. What's the point? This is a great chance to just leverage your reputation for not being such a bad guy compared to the other side, right? And it's also one where if you're worried, well, is the other side going to go and retaliate? Who's going to desert to Putin because he offers you some money? It's you'd have to be pretty stupid to think that's a good deal. Even if he offers you $10 million, so what are the odds this guy's going to pay me? He's probably just going to go and put me in a POW camp or worse. So no thanks.
And there is a historical poetry to it in the sense that it was Europe in the Middle Ages that really pioneered mercenary armies.
Right.
That's how all of their wars were fought for hundreds of years.
Right.
We're just straight up hiring soldiers, and you definitely had case after case of wars flipping because one knight was outbid, or got a better bid from another king in a neighboring area, and they would constantly be playing off each other.
Well, and then when you couldn't pay your mercenary army anymore, then they would just destroy they would just lose your villages and move on.
Go look up the sacking and burning of Rome. It happened.
Or even later in the 30 Years' War, right? There's lots of that in the middle the 1600s.
Yeah, you don't pay your mercenaries, they turn around and burn you down.
Yeah.
No. So
what's worth pointing out is since the initial announcement from the Ukrainians, I haven't heard anything else. Right now, I could be wrong, but it looks more like a publicity stunt just to get some headlines rather than a serious tactic. But this is a tactic that really could work. It would be very cheap compared to other things that people are doing. And the squeamishness that countries are likely to feel about this really is misplaced. It's not like Russia could easily go and do something similar and flip it the other way. That's just not realistic. Who's going to trust them?
It'd be amazing to make it a precedent, too, that in the future, if you are conscripted and all of a sudden sent into battle, just
we'll pay you not to fight.
We'll pay you not to fight.
It'll be the greatest use of money.
Yes, and the other countries would have to then factor that in.
Yeah.
Because then it would be harder to conscript and force
World War II German
people.
soldiers desperately trying to surrender to Americans rather than Soviets. You want to have that reputation. But if the reputation is even better, it's not like you go to a better POW camp, but rather you immediately have a good life and can kiss goodbye the horror of war. That's the reputation you want. Who's going to fight against that?
Well, Bryan Caplan, that's why I wanted to have you on. You come up with creative solutions to problems, or problems that people don't often think of based on economic incentives. So thank you so much for joining us.
Very good to be here. Thanks a lot.
Now, tomorrow on Rising, Emma Camp will join us to talk about that famous New York Times viral op-ed that everyone has been yelling about on Twitter. We're going to talk to her.
We're going to yell at her the whole time.
We're not going to yell at her. I'm supportive of her. You guys can yell at her if you want, but let's not scare her away. She's actually coming to work for Reason Magazine, where I'm also employed, so I'm going to meet her for the first time in this format. Will be funny.
I'm not going to yell. Kim, you going to yell?
No, I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
Oh,
so,
man.
like many people, I'm sure I don't know about this viral op-ed. So what was it even about?
I avoided it for 2 days, and it just kept showing up, and I finally was like,
She wrote about her as a situation. We'll talk about it tomorrow. But she wrote about not feeling able to express herself at her campus, because of her views, and feeling intimidated by progressive liberals not to speak.
Blue Checks bullied her for a day or two.
And then they showed everyone why people feel that way by doing that thing. So anyway.
Also, Andrew Feldman and Denise Long are in for our Rising panel. We're going to talk about the criticism surrounding MSNBC's Joy Reid that she's getting for her coverage of the war against Ukraine.
No criticism against Joy Reid. Who would have thought, right? All right, and for you podcast lovers, guess what? Rising is now available everywhere you listen to podcasts. So do us a favor, give us a five-star rating, because that helps people find the show. So be sure to do that. And look at that. Don't we look great?
That's our 1987 version.
That looks so cool.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Oh. I love it. The vibe shift has taken us back to
the vibe shift. I've wanted the vibe shift. I embrace the vibe shift. Take me.
All right.
See you then.
Bye, guys.